New tonight, Governor Andy Beshear is pushing back on questions about the legal power of his new executive order on data centers. Last week, he signed the order to protect against what he called harmful impacts from potential data centers in Kentucky and to give local communities a stronger voice in whether those projects can move forward. Some critics question whether the order can really direct the Public Service Commission to stop utilities from raising rates to cover data center costs. But Beshear says there is no gray area. He insists the order is fully enforceable and the companies will have to present their plans with those rules in mind.
The executive order is fully enforceable, and if you don't believe it, watch me. Watch what happens as we move forward. Watch how these companies present their plans as they have to. Watch the actions of the various agencies.
Beshear says the order is also designed to improve communication between data center companies and the communities where they want to build.